Well, welcome to Drug-Drug Interaction Clinical Decision Support webinar. I'm Dan Malone. I'm the a professor at the University of Utah in the Department of Pharmacotherapy, and kind of been leading our webinar series, trying to improve the relevance of drug-drug interaction warnings. I'm pleased that you were able to join us today. We have a guest from First Databank, Anna Dover. And she'll be talking about the deployment of contextualized drug-drug interaction clinical decision support. Before we turn it over to Anna, I want to get, for those of you that are not familiar with our program, I want to do a brief introduction. We've had a research team been working on the issue of clinical decision support for drug-drug interactions and contextualizing them. And our team consists of faculty and research associates from across multiple institutions, including the University of Arizona, the University of Pittsburgh, Mercer University, obviously the University of Utah, and then some health systems, in this case, Banner Health. So we have a website where we host materials about our work. It's DDI-CDS.org, and we post materials from our webinars, also tools that we've developed to assist those of you in the day-to-day practice of pharmacy and medicine with clinical decision support as it relates to drug-drug interactions. I'd encourage you to visit our website and check out the tools that we've created. We're sponsored by a grant from the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality. And the grant is called Meaningful Drug Interaction Alerts. And one of the things that we're interested in doing is disseminating our findings to organizations, hospitals and healthcare systems, and disseminating that information so that they could potentially improve their drug interaction warning systems. So if you've looked at our website and taken one or more components of some of the algorithms that we've highlighted there and have implemented those activities to reduce alert fatigue with respect to drug interaction warnings, we'd love to hear from you. So you can contact us at info.ddicds.org and tell us a little bit about what you're doing. And we've done some work looking at trying to improve our system. We've conducted interviews with pharmacists and CMIOs, clinicians, and IT professionals. We've been asking the question, what are the barriers to implementing clinically relevant drug-drug interactions? So if you'd like to provide any feedback to us, feel free to reach out to me. We'd love to hear from you. Again, here's my direct email address is danmalone@utah.edu. So if you'd like to share anything about your approach to reducing alert fatigue, you could go through our website or you can reach out to me directly. Yeah. So I want to introduce Dr. Dover to you today. She's a board certified pharmacotherapy specialist that joined First Databank in 2017 after working more than 6 years in clinical decision support as a lead and an EHR analyst at the New Hanover Regional Medical Center in Wilmington, North Carolina. Anna received her Bachelor of Science degree in pharmacy from The Ohio State University and Doctor of Pharmacy from the University of Florida. As I mentioned, she's board certified in pharmacotherapy and has practiced more than 11 years in hospital pharmacy. She has direct patient experience as well as pharmacy management experience and has practiced in Ohio, Florida, and North Carolina. As Director of Product Management, Anna is responsible for several solutions designed to simplify alert management and provide patient-specific decision support. So with that, I'll turn it over to Anna. Thank you very much for joining us today, Anna. And I'll stop share and you should be able to share screen now.
Great, thanks, Dan. Can you hear me okay and see my slideshow okay?
Yep, we can hear you just fine. And yeah, at the moment we're seeing, I guess, the traditional PowerPoint, but we're not, there we go. Now you're in full screen.
All right, great, thank you. Well, thank you for introducing me again. As Dan mentioned, I am a pharmacist by background. I've been with FDB for almost 5 years now. And prior to joining FDB, I did work in an Epic database as an analyst and decision support lead. I loaded FDB data, customized FDB alerts, and used tools both in the EHR as well as tools from FDB. So as we move forward and you have questions, feel free to dig in a bit. And I will do my best to answer questions. So when folks think of FDB, they typically think of our traditional database named FDB Med Knowledge. We have a lot of FDB curated content that we make available. And typically folks think of our content as something intrinsic in their software. We provide the database, software vendors program to it, and there's a lot of great information out there. But as EHRs have been implemented and medical knowledge has grown, there can be challenges in the space, especially in the clinical screening arena, and we're aware of that. We are very proud of our content curation. We have folks from our clinical team that have participated in this group for a long time, Joan Kabusnik-Uner, Christine Summer, and others. And we're always striving to improve our traditional content. And this is just a snippet from a study that was done with Joni and others comparing the different databases commercially available that you may find in software, and the intersection of the content that there may be between the different vendors. So you can see that, there's opinion matters, there's research behind it. We're all thoughtful in how we create our content and how we deploy it. At FDB, we are proud of the fact that we try to be as judicious as possible with the amount of content and the granularity of the content that we put out there. But we are aware that there are still challenges in the space. And some of them, of course, alert fatigue is a problem that can be compounded by lack of specificity in the content or how others have programmed to the content. It can be too sensitive. And we currently focus on more of a knowledge or rules-based approach. There are some in the space trying to advance in more of machine learning or AI-based approaches, but there's a lot to be done in that space and a lot to learn. And while we explore it as a company, our approach currently is to continue moving forward with the most patient-aware and safe approach that we can as we learn more. So looking at this slide, this is telling you really what we're doing as a company to try and improve what's available out there. And we're calling this patient first care guidance. The idea that one of the great challenges in medication decision support today is that it takes what we call a drug first approach. Drug A and drug B, when prescribed together, could cause a problem for that patient. And so it can create a lot of noise with cautionary alerts that are not patient specific enough. And what we're trying to do is flip that around and screen not when the drug is being prescribed necessarily, but when something is happening with the patient. And so we call this our patient first approach to screening. So this could involve other workflow points that the screening occurs as opposed to the traditional approaches, but it's also looking at the patient condition and the patient setting as opposed to just the two drugs in isolation being prescribed together. So you can see an array of solutions listed below in the year that we released them. AlertSpace is one that some of you may be familiar with. This is a tool that FDB released in 2012 that allows folks to customize our clinical screening content. Now, this was a way for us to help customers start to refine the alerting with a tool that makes it easy to understand what you're touching and customizing as well as maintain. And this was a way for us to support our customers without requiring vendor programming. So what they're ultimately doing is customizing their data feed from FDB, minimizing the work that would be needed in the software and really reducing the maintenance required. And while that helped customers really refine our content based on their unique care setting and policies and procedures and protocols, we needed to do more. And as a vision, our clinicians before I joined have been exploring this space. As I mentioned, Joan and Christine and others have participated in this work group. And from that has developed a product called Targeted Medication Warnings. And what we're doing with targeted medication warnings is building on not just the patient setting, but bringing in some other patient factors or clinical indicators. So lab values, diagnoses, and other information that's available in the EHR to alert when it really matters, making it that patient context driven alert. And that has been live in Epic environments since 2019. It's using a web service integration. It's a little different integration than our traditional content, but it allows us to deploy other content that you may not think of as refined drug-drug interaction content through the same integration. And that's why I've listed pharmacogenomics here. And pharmacogenomics is a newer set of content that we've created. We started with a subset of that content and targeted medication warnings based on an early adopter of the product. They had a grant from the ONC as part of the Sync for Genes project, phase 2, I believe. And they were deploying targeted medication warnings and asked us if we could provide that pharmacogenomic content, a subset of content to get them going. And so we did that. And from there, we had others express interest in the content, and we have since released it in a more traditional API, an SDK, and that's been available for direct vendor integration since 2020. CDS Analytics is our newest product in the suite, and this is really closing the loop on decision support. We all know that the best decision support requires review, revision, and surveillance, and so that's what we're doing with CDS Analytics, pulling out information not just about medication warnings, but other information from the EHR and displaying it in a way that makes it easy for folks to understand their alert environment overall, the alert burden that's impacting their clinicians overall. And then where we want to go next is surveillance, because we know the best decision support is not necessarily interruptive. We want to get into more of a passive surveillance. And so that's where we're heading next. So Alert Space. Alert Space, as I mentioned, is a tool that allows customers to customize their data feed from us. It's intended for institution-specific customization. So for example, sites that have a large transplant population may want to adjust some of the dosing content that we have to make sure that they're getting appropriate initial loads on patients with certain drugs. Or you may have an orthopedic specialty practice that wants to have more specific alerting around their policies and protocols. That's the intent of Alert Space. At a high level, it's a web-based tool. So go to the website, log in. It doesn't matter what software you're using, as long as they're using FDB clinicals, you're customizing the data feed. You can use Alert Space. Functionally, it's a great way to view our content. So really understanding the drug-drug interaction, the participants in it, the pairs, you can modify it. So you can modify participants. You can even turn off alerting. You can adjust the severity level, for example. The big benefit, I think, functionally is it creates a really rich change history, because once you customize something, you own it effectively. And so we give a number of tools so that folks can understand when our content changes, understand why it changed, and determine if they want to maintain a customization, revise it, or even revert back to FDB standard. And because it's customizing the data feed from us, it doesn't require any technical resources or interfaces. You load the FDB data in the same way you always do. So really making it as easy as possible as a tool for folks to optimize our content. And then benefits, of course, we want to improve the clinician experience, but I think the biggest benefit is it's simplifying alert management. I know there were a couple of webinars recently around some of the work to be done to determine what to optimize and then ways to optimize it. I did a lot of that work in my past life as well, and it can be onerous. And while small changes can make a big impact, what we're trying to do with Alert Space is just make it easier to make progress. So I have a screenshot here of something that we released in 2018, sorry. And it's our dashboard to review alert statistics from the EHR. And we currently have integrations with several platforms, but what we can do is consume the alert statistics from the different EHRs and map it back to the FDB content that caused the alert. This allows customers to see the highest volume alerts. It's not meant to be an all-inclusive analytics tool. It's a feature to help identify low-hanging fruit, so to speak. But we give you a top 10 list. We give you filters so that you can refine and find top 10 by different provider types, so pharmacist or physician or nurse. You can refine it based on patient location or even response to alert. And then it allows you to go directly to the FDB content causing the alert and see the participants and the volume that the participants may have caused an alert so that you can decide how you might want to optimize that alert. And then we also have a trending over time feature, so you can see the progress that you're making as you optimize that content. And Dan, I can't see while I screen share if there are any questions or anything. I don't know if you want me to pause while we go along for questions or just continue on through.
Well, if there are questions that come up in the Q&A, and there should be a button at the bottom of your screen for the participants to provide a question, feel free to do that. And then Anna, I'll interrupt you if I need to bring that up. So,
Okay.
but at the moment, we don't have any questions, but I should have mentioned that at the beginning of the webinar that we're more than welcome. We want to have a discussion. So feel free to put your questions in the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen, and we'll forward those on to you, Anna. So,
Okay, great.
So feel free to keep moving ahead.
All right. So I talked a bit about AlertSpace. This is a tool that we released about 10 years ago now. And while it helped, I mentioned before, we wanted to bring in additional patient specificity, and that's where our targeted medication warning solution comes in. And what we're doing there is really bringing in that patient information, clinical information, as well as clinical context to identify those patients at greatest risk of harm, as well as decreasing noise around them. Because once we identify that patient, you can actually filter off overlapping content that may be less specific. Because we're doing a little different integration with the web service, we've designed it to minimize the customer configuration and maintenance. It can be challenging to create this type of decision support, and then maintaining it is another burden as well. And so we designed it in a way that there's a catalog to choose from, and the groups that we create, whether medication or diagnosis, we design them in a way to minimize the maintenance, where our clinicians are effectively maintaining that for you. So it may help to have an example. And here's an example that I think is aligned with some of your algorithms out there, Dan, or at least related, but hyperkalemia. On the left, you have a display of our traditional drug-drug interactions. So we may have a variety of severities, severe, moderate. Most customers in an inpatient setting, very often, they may filter off the moderate alerts for physicians because they might be deemed too noisy. Most will have the severe alerts on, definitely all should have the contraindicated on. And in this example, you can see for the patient, there are very common things that you may do in a heart failure patient, for example. So ACE inhibitor and a potassium supplement. That's a pretty common occurrence. It is appropriate. It's in line with the guidelines, but it does require some increased monitoring. What we've done is, by leveraging that patient's lab value and only alerting when the patient has a high potassium lab value, now we can filter off the less specific content and display. We provide a threshold to our customers that we recommend for that potassium trigger, but they can refine it if they decide that organizationally they'd like a higher or lower level. The other thing we do is we consolidate the information. So while it may be one drug with a second drug on the profile that caused the alert, we actually are pulling all of the drug-drug interactions that relate to hyperkalemia, and can even pull individual agents that can cause hyperkalemia to display within the alert. So the provider has all of the information they need to make a decision on how they might want to refine the medication list. This is an enlarged view of the HTML that we actually send in our web service response. And we're pretty proud of the display. We spent a lot of time iterating with clinicians on the best display, but you'll notice a few things here. We're calling out what's going on with the patient. So the patient is hyperkalemic. We have two columns in this table that display one on the left, the primary causative agent, and then the potentiating agent on the right. So you can have an agent that could be on both sides, but the idea is that it's giving that clinician the information that they need on how they might want to refine that medication list. We are available in the Epic App Orchard. If you go in to look at our App Orchard listing, you'll see this screenshot as well. We are allowed to use it. Epic's approved it, but you'll see the same HTML rendered within a BPA. So we're using a BPA web service integration within Epic. You'll notice that there's some actionable buttons here. So you can see remove or keep for the drug. We actually send in our response in the web service what drugs to recommend that they could remove. In our display, we actually show the lab trend using that native functionality. So you can see the prior 3 potassium labs. And then for acknowledgement reasons, we provide additional acknowledgement reasons that are more specific to help us understand how someone has interacted with the alert. So I mentioned we've been live since 2019 with this in health systems. And we do have some early adopter data that we can share. And so this has been out for a couple of years now, but the blue dots, as you can see, are monthly averages of our traditional drug-drug interactions that are interruptive alerts in their EHR. So this customer only had severe and contraindicated drug-drug interactions on SL2 and SL1 and FDB data. You can see the override rate increasing on the left. And then you can see the number of alerts increasing going to left. And so the orange dots are the monthly averages for the new targeted alert. And so what you can see is that we've been able to reduce the volume significantly, which is very exciting. But even more importantly, we've increased the acceptance rate. It's the inverse of the override rate. It's common for folks to report things as an override rate, especially in the Epic channel. Now, what's interesting is that not only are we replacing those SL1 and SL2 or contraindicated and severe drug-drug interactions related to hyperkalemia, but we're also bringing in the moderate interactions that are typically filtered. And we've added another workflow point. So the blue dots are our traditional workflow point of signing orders and verifying orders that physicians and pharmacies see. And while we have that with the orange targeted med alert data, we've also added the ability to alert later in the workflow after a lab value has come back.
So Anna, there's a question that David asks, can this type of alert also trigger based on trends, say a value increasing by X amount over a 24-hour period?
Yeah, we do have that. We're not doing it currently with hyperkalemia, but we do have that with a renal function alert that we've created, where we're looking at a bump in serum creatinine in a set period of time.
Great, thank you. Hopefully that answered your question, David.
Okay. We have been attending HL7 Connectathons since 2015 as a company, and we've been successfully connecting through CDS hooks at the Connectathons since 2018. 2018. So you can see here's one from Cerner. This is from maybe a year or two ago. We've connected with other EHRs as well. So, we continue to explore in that space as well. We're really waiting for those specifications and EHR deployment of them to meet the needs to have really actionable decision support. But just giving you a view of how it can also look in the hook. The HTML looks a little different. I think we use something called Markdown in there. Just giving you an idea of the catalog. I mentioned hyperkalemia QT prolongation. We have content around opioid risk and others that we continue to work through. And then what we're working on now is digging in more with some other patient condition driven alerts and ways that we can help score and identify risk, where something it requires more than a binary view of the drug regimen. I mentioned the pharmacogenomics CDS as part of this because it is, effectively a lab-driven alert as well and important in appropriate medication prescribing. What we've done as a company, we call it a bring your own testing. Really, we know that the science is evolving. There can often be disagreement about how to interpret to phenotype level, and also that it can vary by lab. So we've really focused on phenotype for the most part, level screening. We do have some genotype association when needed for that as well. And what we've done is, again, all of our alerts, we've focused on this very clear, concise statement of what is going on with the patient. So the physician who collaborated with us on this really said, I need you to tell me why you're alerting me and what you want me to do. And that's what you'll see with our rationale statement and our risk statement here. And so with that, it is important, though, to have summarized information behind it. So if someone wants to better understand or dig in more, and we have this with all of our alerts, but if you choose our more information, you can see summarized information about the alert. You can see the evidence rating, and for pharmacogenomics in particular, we actually have hyperlinks to the source material because we know that it's an evolving science and folks are learning. So we want to make it as easy for them to learn as possible. And so just showing you, we do have that alert also available within Epic, but just showing you again in the CDS hooks how we can provide that information. And then lastly, I mentioned that we have an analytics product that we use. And the idea is that, we're building on top of what we did with alert-based analytics. Alert-based analytics, we consume the alert statistics as related to our medication screening, the content that we provide. And that's important, but when you're a clinician in an EHR, you're not typically thinking, well, that was a med alert, that's a BPA, or, something from the Discern engine. This is an alternative alert. They're not thinking it's a pop-up, it's interrupting their workflow, and it's a burden to them and can dilute any other important information in there that may be interruptive. So what we're doing with CDS analytics is really bringing in the information to better understand not just the overall alert burden, but the alert burden at the individual provider level. And so the idea is to evaluate the efficacy of the decision support. You want to be able to analyze the local patterns. You want to understand not just medication alerts, but the local or custom alerts, as well as if you've deployed our targeted medication warnings, be able to see those and compare them to the traditional medication alerting to decide how you might want to refine it. It's designed to help you identify when CDS is likely malfunctioning, so it can help point you in the direction of something that could be problematic and really help you understand, as I mentioned, that alert burden. So at the provider level, the specialty of that provider, the department or patient location, because very often patterns will surface that will help you understand how you might need to optimize something. Summarizing and then ultimately allowing you to drill in to the specific alert instance so you can see how someone responded to it and better understand how it's performing. So I'll pause there. I don't know if there are additional questions, Dan, but that was really, I thought I would share just some of the tools we've created on how we have tried to improve that patient specificity of our content. We do use this data from CDS analytics and alert-based analytics to understand how our traditional content performs as well. Because our clinicians are always trying to improve that. But some of these things require more understanding of the specific setting, and that's where we've created these tools.
Yeah, thanks, Anna. Yeah, so there's a question about the FDB contributing to the HL7 implementation guide. Or question, is FDB contributing to the HL7 implementation guide development related to using the HL7 standards like CDS Hook or FHIR for delivering the targeted medication alerts? So you kind of alluded to participation in some of those groups, but I guess that's a specific question.
Yeah, so we do participate through the Connectathons. I think it's a report out that we do. We've had folks from Cerner and then Epic actually reach out to us for input on certain items or components of the specification. We provide our input. Through Zulip, we're not participating in the working group meetings at this time, but primarily through the report outs with the specification at the Connectathons. And we've continued participating through the pandemic with remote Connectathons as well. I think attendance has dropped off pretty dramatically as we went to remote Connectathons.
So there's a comment from Joni about the catalog of use cases. So focused on drug-drug interaction, clinical consequences. So evidently there's an interplay with alert space on these two.
Yeah, thank you, Joni. Sorry about that. So we have, I talked about hyperkalemia, for example, as one of our use cases in targeted medication warnings. And it's magic that happens. But really what it is Joni's team has reviewed our drug-drug interaction content and assigned what we call a clinical consequence to drug-drug interactions, and I believe at this point drug-drug interaction pairs for the clinical consequence of that potential for drug interaction. And so hyperkalemia, we have additional data attributes to identify that. So it allows us to, we use it in the screening for targeted medication alerts, but then it also allows the end user to easily filter in alert space the overlapping drug-drug interaction content and decide how they might want to filter off to replace with a new, more specific alert. And our clinicians have created recommendations based on our editorial policy of how folks could consider filtering off the overlapping content. But we do have some customers that keep it on as well, using this as an add-on alert to make it more specific. How'd I do, Joni?
So another comment, great overview presentation. Wondering if Anna could share a rough number of the clinical pharmacists it takes to, say, maintain this drug interaction knowledge database as you perhaps modify or improve your care alerting within your institutions. Any experience there that you could share, Anna?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'll probably need Joni to help with this. One of the things that we've done is, we have a team of roughly 3 pharmacists that focus on this new, more specific decision support, but it's not the only thing they work on. They work on several things. And then we also have our drug-drug interaction content team. So it's a bit of a divide and conquer, but Joni, can you type in the chat, how many pharmacists do we have working on this overall? I mean, this is a core focus. It's part of our core clinicals. It's an extension of it. So it's a little trickier to say to do this takes X number of pharmacists because we're relating it back to the traditional content as well.
But Anna, maybe I could try to, so Joni said a group of 6 or more to maintain the group. Okay. But do you have any client experience with how many organizations have implemented it and a sense of what the clients are doing in terms of maintaining it?
Yeah, so really we're maintaining it for them. So what we do is we provide everything in an importable format. So the invoking logic, the clinical invoking logic, so the lab threshold, we have an implementation lead who actually that's her skill set. She has a series of kind of extracts pulled out. She does the mapping and provides it back in an importable format. And then the way we structure, say, the medication groups, we're using FDB concepts that when you do your FDB data load, it updates those groups for you. And so typically an implementation is about 10 to 15 hours of an analyst time. We carve it out with a 1 hour working meeting each week. We may bring in others. Setting up the web service is typically 1 to 2 hours to do both non-production and production because we do that testing piece. But all said, we're target to be live in 12 weeks. Sometimes we have to pause as folks who have other IT projects going on. We work with that, but typically it's 10 to 15 hours. And then from the maintenance standpoint, we're doing that There may be a diagnosis group to update, and that happens maybe once a year, once or twice a year.
Okay, great. So, so I'm gonna share my screen and bring your picture up again, Anna. But there's another question. This is from Colleen, and she asks, do any of these functionalities specifically address the difficulty of assessing the impact of pairwise interactions in the context of patients on many concurrent medications? We call this the problem of polypharmacy, right? So how do we sort out lots of potential drug interactions? So any comments about that, Anna?
Well, I can answer to a certain extent, and then I'll probably have to lean on Joni or others on her team to help answer that. I do know that we use the clinical consequence attribute and kind of an array of attributes to identify the overlapping drug-drug interaction. And then within that, I mentioned the display. So we have the different columns of information. And actually, I may just bring that up again if that's okay, Dan.
Sure, I'll stop share.
That may help. I'm always better with pictures, is what I've realized. So, and so looking at the display with the two columns here, the primary causative agent and the potentiator, this is breaking down that pair piece a bit more. We're leveraging an additional module in the alert display for what we actually display. And in the more information page, we can actually provide additional medications that you don't see here as an interruptive alert. But we're using our side effects module content as well to help refine the messaging and alerting to help with some of that interplay with the drug pairs. And then Joni's talking about, I see in the chat, the aggregation of interactions by clinical consequences. So we're using the clinical consequences for that, but then we're using in some of the other data to help identify the most likely agents for causing something as well. Did that help answer the question?
I think so. Colleen, excuse me, Colin, if you want to ask another question, feel free to jump in. So, and then I think, Joni, we've promoted you to allow you to speak if you'd like to clarify or add to any of Anna's comments. So at the moment, I don't see any other questions pending. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and screen share my computer here real quick. So just to let folks know, some of the work that we've been doing, we published a paper in the December 15th issue of AJHP, looking at serum potassium changes with a combination that you probably see alerts on frequently, and that's ACE-ARB and spironolactone. So a potassium-sparing diuretic. So we did basically a meta-analysis of the data for that. So that might be of interest to you if you're looking at trying to customize your warnings related to hyperkalemia and exposure to these two, or to ACE-ARBs or and spironolactone, those types of class medications. There's another question related to the cost of these applications factor in for institutions, or is that outside the scope of the presentation? I think the cost is probably outside the scope, but I think, Anna, if I just have you affirm my statement that these sort of tools can be contracted in addition to the First Databank knowledge database, right?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. So I guess the recommendation would be to reach out to your representative from FDB if you want to explore some of these in more detail. All right. Well, at the moment, I don't see any other questions. We had over 70 nearly 80 attendees into the webinar. So this has been fantastic. So I don't see any open questions. I'm just going to say, we appreciate you attending today. And Anna, thank you for sharing some of the work that First Databank has been doing. It's great to see kind of the commercial side of what we've been working on the research side. So thanks for sharing that with us today. And as always, we appreciate those of you that have taken time out of your schedule to attend our webinar. As we kind of close down this webinar, we're kind of closing down some of the activities, funded activities we've been doing on our grant. You know, we're looking for continuing to support our research through other grants, but we're going into kind of a doing it without funding for a year or so. But we'd love to hear back from you as you do any modifications. So if you've taken some of these tools and implemented them, you know, we'd love to hear how it went and share your experience with us. So feel free to reach out to myself or any of those on our team, and we'd like to hear from you. So with that, we'd say thank you very much for your time and have a great day. And thank you again, Anna. Appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting us. Have a great day.